Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Two things we talk about today. One, very briefly, but I'll take that in the beginning. And that is something where I will not give you my opinion. I know I'll be tempted to give it to you, and you will be tempted to hear my opinion. But I will leave it to you to have your opinion. I will do the equivalent what in my biology dissection classes was called expose the specimen and let the supervisor then figure out whether I had done it right or not and what to make of it. So you make something of it. I will just cut open this specimen. So that is about this report that came out this Thursday and caused a little bit of a sensation and controversy about these meetings of a group of ministers, where some other ministers also joined in now and then, group of 9 key ministers of Modi government to brainstorm with many eminent names from the media and many eminent names from the corporate world and elsewhere on how to control or how to modulate Modi government's communication message to people and to the media, or briefly, how to get a more favorable media. So that is one. The second thing we'll talk about is, and that's very interesting, and we'll talk about that in more detail. That is that the White House now, this week on Wednesday, issued what is called the presidential as the White House guidance on national security. This is by Biden administration's first interim national security guidance. This was issued this Wednesday, and that has very important points about China, about Indo-Pacific, about India, about where Joe Biden's administration may differ from what Trump was doing on foreign policy and where it may not differ, and also where it differs, whether the difference will be in substance or in style, and whatever it is, what does it mean for India? So that we'll talk about in a little more detail. Now, first of all, look at these meetings. So I am not judging the content of these meetings and these suggestions. I have seen these suggestions before. Every government, when in trouble, has held meetings like this. It has set up groups of ministers, and they've come up with ideas which are exactly the same ideas. These are all motherhood and apple pie. These mean nothing. These are things that you could have said in 1960s, 70s, 50s, anytime. No big deal. The interesting thing is the timing, and that is the point I want to raise with you, and that is how I will cut open the specimen and expose it to you, and you then figure out what does it look like and what your opinion on it would be. These meetings took place, if I can just read out the dates: 14th June, 20th June, 22nd June, 26th June, 24th June, 23rd June, in fact 2 meetings on 23rd June, and on 30th June, and then one on 9th of July. Now, I'll take you back to June 2020 and first week of July 2020. So go back, it wasn't that far back. You can also Google it and see what was happening in India and around India. This is when the migrant crisis was at its peak. Migrants who were walking back home, in some cases up to 1,500 kilometers, on their feet. You had those pictures of their feet, blistered feet. Some were getting killed in road accidents. They were walking back. So all over India, we had this big migrant crisis. That is one. Now, you might say that these ministers didn't have very much to do with it, but these are 9 cabinet ministers. Second, this was also the period when India's coronavirus numbers were rising. See India's coronavirus graph and the deaths graph. So March, about a year to date, March 24th or so, we declared our lockdown. By the end of May, early June, our numbers had begun to rise. And see that graphic, numbers are beginning to rise until they peak in September. So numbers had begun to rise. It was the month of June that India passed the unhappy landmark of 25,000 new cases a day and 400 deaths a day. To put 400 deaths in perspective, today or yesterday, India had 113 deaths, and we are still worried about it. We want that number to be below 100. Or this week, India has averaged about 16,000 cases a day, and we are still worried about it. In June, it had already crossed 25,400 deaths a day. By early July, it had risen even more. So there was the big coronavirus crisis looming in the country. Hospitals had begun to feel the strain on beds, on doctors. Many doctors were sick. This was a crisis period for India to that extent. And you would have expected that all my government is focusing on is how to fix this problem or how to answer this problem. No medicine by then, no vaccine by then. Even the few treatments that came up by way of management which reduced fatalities, they were still being discovered at that point of time. Nevertheless, so take yourself back, your mind back to that period of crisis. India was under a pakka firm lockdown. Then I will not miss out the most important point. 15th of June, the same month, the first of these meetings has taken place on 14th of June, second on 20th June, 22nd June, 26th June, 23rd June, 23rd June, 24th June, 30th June, 7th July. So 15th of June is when that clash between Indian and Chinese troops took place at Galwan, where 20 Indian soldiers died and several Chinese soldiers died. As you've seen from Snehesh Alex Phillips' story, the Chinese have admitted to 4 having died, but even now they don't seem to have a count. They go from 4 to 9 to 14 or whatever. So a bunch of Chinese soldiers and more importantly 20 Indian soldiers, including Colonel Santosh Babu, died. When that happened, the situation with China on Ladakh border became much more tense. It became much more tense and fraught, and that's when tensions began rising around the Pangong area also, and India also started. China started a full-fledged mobilization, bringing in tanks and things, and India also then responded in kind and quickly started moving in large bodies of troops because it looked like this was going to be a long standoff. It was during that month with this multiple crisis, coronavirus, migrants walking back, our cities, our economy being shut down because of the lockdown, and a warlike situation on the borders in Ladakh with a much stronger power, China. These 9 key ministers in the central cabinet were holding this flurry of meetings to try and figure out how to control the message from the media and what to do about inconvenient people or inconvenient institutions in the media. Something about their priorities. I mean, there were funny things like somebody came with an idea that journalists should be color coded, right? Friendly, I don't know what each one's color was. I think it said friendly is green, something else is white, something else is something friendly, fence sitters, unfriendly. So whether it was a good thing or not a good thing, whether the media is being fair to the BJP government or not, you decide on that. But should 9 cabinet members have been holding these meetings in the month of June and early July when India had these multiple crises? Was it a good idea? What does it say for the government's priorities? You decide. I will not speak on this. So you have your own opinion. So I leave it at that and come to our larger point today, which is White House's interim national security guidance. Now, this is a 24-page document. I am sharing the document with you, just as I am also sharing the report of the group of ministers on how to handle the media also with you with the description. So you will see both of those and this 24-page White House document. Now, I don't have to read out the entire document to you. Even if I read out the highlights, it will take too long. Plus, it will be insulting all your intelligence or all of your smart people. So what I do is I pick up some key points and also give you an analytical implication of those. So we are helped in that pursuit by a very nice article written by Dimitri Sevastopoulou in the Financial Times, which puts this in perspective. I'm sharing that article also with you. So please read primary source material as well while I declutter it for you. So he starts, in fact, with a speech that Joe Biden delivered at the online Munich Security Conference last month. And there, Biden said that for the US and its allies, China is now the long-term strategic competition. He also said that US and its allies have to now push back at Beijing's economic abuses and coercion that undercut the foundations of the international economic system. Now, two important things there in that line. Number one, that China is the main threat, not just to the US, but also its allies. Trump said China is the most important threat, but he never cared very much for the allies. If anything, he poured contempt on the allies. But in this case, Biden is talking about allies. Second, he's putting this threat much more in the central perspective of the economic system, of a fair global economic system. So today's strategic issues are not all about guns and missiles and aircraft carriers and submarines and etc. etc. They are about your gross national power, GNP. And gross national power, one of the key determinants of gross national power now is economic interests. So he says that. Then he goes on to say, we are in the midst of a fundamental debate about the future direction of the world. And what is that future direction is very important to understand. He says the choice today is between autocracy, one view that says autocracy is the best way forward, and the other argument from those who believe that democracy is essential for any way forward. So implication is the Chinese method is that autocracy is good, dictatorship is good to move forward, it's the only way forward. The other argument in the world is that no, there is no alternative other than democracy, and he is weighing in on the side of the second argument, on the side of democracy being essential. Then there are quotes also from Antony Blinken, who, as we know, is Biden's Secretary of State, and Jake Sullivan, his national security advisor, who both used very tough language. So Antony Blinken has agreed with Pompeo, his predecessor, on calling what China is doing to the Uyghurs as genocide. Very important. Second, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, he said that if China continues on with abuses, costs will be imposed on China. Now, this is not maybe something that China was expecting to hear from the new Biden administration. So, important thing is that in essence and its substance, Biden administration is promising to be as tough on China as the previous one. It will be less rude in its language, but more substantive in its response. The other important thing is Trump wanted to do everything by himself, whereas Biden in every line invokes his allies. Trump, on the other hand, had irritated his allies. He had created power vacuums because of the way he was making fun of his allies, pouring scorn over them, sending a bill to the Germans for his troops being there, etc., etc. So he was creating power vacuums. He was weakening his allies. He also made his allies uncertain because he said, "Kal ko push comes to the shove, will America come and be an ally or not?" So a lot of the American allies, particularly in Europe, were uncertain about him. South Korea was very uncertain about him because half the time he seemed to be in love with Kim Jong-un, as if he was the greatest statesman in the world. So that is now, in a way, sort of a kind of center of American policy is going back to a more familiar center of gravity, or to reword my line, the center of gravity of American foreign policy, strategic policy, is going back in a more familiar place to the rest of the world. So that is important. Second, this FT article tells you, it quotes something that Dean Acheson had said. In fact, if you Google Dean Acheson, he was the first Secretary of State of America after World War II. So Dean Acheson, you Google it, you will find this phrase. A phrase that Dean Acheson made immortal: situations of strength. Americans love these phrases. So situations of strength means when you get like-minded countries to cooperate together against a common threat. So there is an indication that Biden is going back to the Acheson doctrine, not Trump's एकला चलो रे, मैं अमिताभ बच्चन, मैं 50 आदमी को अकेला मारूंगा, और मैं सनी देओल, मैं सारी पाकिस्तानी आर्मी को, I can destroy all of Pakistani army by myself. So he's neither playing Sunny Deol nor Amitabh Bachchan. He's playing the President of America. Then, this statement goes on to say that they will get like-minded powers to cooperate to tackle all threats. There are challenges. The challenge is America knows that even when it reaches out to its allies, there is no appetite left, particularly in Europe now, for a return of the Cold War. That's why Europe has been very uncertain. They have a lot of insecurities about China. They've moved on 5G, Huawei, etc. At the same time, they just signed a trade deal with China, which is not something that Biden would have wanted just when he was taking over. So this is not like what had happened, say, in Yalta after the Second World War, when America and the big European powers got together and said, push comes to the shove, we are all together towards a common objective. That in a way triggered the Cold War. So Europe does not have the stomach for that Cold War. So this policy now has to be calibrated and has to be nuanced for that. Now there's a line that Biden has used in this document, by the way, signed by Biden, this White House guidance, interim guidance on national security. The line that he has used, which I think is the key line or the nut graph, as they say in American journalism, the nut graph is China, quote, China is the only competitor for America and its allies. China is the only competitor for America and its allies potentially capable of combining its economic, military, diplomatic, and technological power to mount a sustained challenge to a stable and open international system. What this has done is, this has demoted Russia. Until now, Russia was seen as the preeminent threat to America as its allies. So maybe it's fitting that 30 years now, exactly 30 years after the Cold War ended, Russia has now been demoted, or it's now been pushed down, and China has moved ahead. So China is now the number one threat, challenge, adversary, whatever you call it. Then this document talks about strengthening the Quad, very important for India. It even talks about working with India, Japan, Australia to use vaccine diplomacy to achieve some objectives in the region. Again, very important. Now, when you hear this, you have to put this in perspective. Why is Biden doing it? Why is Biden not being softer? Why is Biden not immediately starting talks with China on this and that? Because politicians are politicians, and politicians respond to public opinion. And what is the public opinion in America? So the two young people who are helping me with research on this, that is Tenzin Zompa and Riti Agrawal, they've pulled out this nugget from the latest Pew Research report in America on attitudes. Now, these are specifically the points that come out on American attitudes towards China. So hold your breath and listen to me. This is how America's mood is about China right now. 89%, that is 9 out of 10, 89% adults in America now see China either as a competitor or an enemy. 99 out of 10. That's a lot of Americans who see China as an enemy or a competitor. 48% of Americans actually think that the foremost objective of American power should be to contain China's power, to contain China's rise. That's almost half of Americans. So 48% think that this is the most important priority before America. Now you say 48%, what was it earlier? In 2018, it was 32%. Similarly, this research has a feelings thermometer. That, do you feel warm towards somebody? Usually you don't want a thermometer to show any warmth, particularly in these days of COVID. You don't want it going over 98 very much. And I suspect Americans are working on Fahrenheit. So are you cold towards somebody? Cold is bad, warm is good. So 67% are cold to China on this feeling thermometer. This is up from 46% in 2018. Then very cold, that is 0 to 24 degrees, and I presume it's America, so it's Fahrenheit. So it's really very cold, because 0 in Fahrenheit is very cold. It's not the same as 0 in centigrade. So 0 to 24, that cold is 47%. That is up from 23% in 2018. So that has very cold has more than doubled. So Americans really detest China right now. 50% of these people who dislike China, they say it is because of China's human rights situation. So once again, remember, Americans are very conscious of human rights, particularly when it comes to other countries. So you might today jubilate that Americans hold China in such bad light or see China in such bad light because of their human rights situation. But that is also a reminder to us in India and other countries that human rights now are not an internal affair, that your friends, your allies also are concerned about human rights situations across the world. So don't do anything that embarrasses your friends and allies and strengthens your adversaries. Then 9 out of 10 Americans said in this poll that China does not respect personal freedoms. 90%. It is bad news. Now, 1 out of 5 people, when they were asked what is it that worries about China, 1 out of 5 immediately said topmost thing is human rights situation. 19% said economy in terms of competition to America, concerns to America. 17% said political system. 13% said threats, as in military threats. Then negative adjectives used about China, that is 12% people who were using gali galoj about China. Negative adjectives used about China is 12%. So you compare that with how many people are using positive adjectives about China. That is just 4%, 4%, 1 out of 25. Now, so Biden administration is responding to this public opinion. As I said, no government, no elected government in a democracy can ignore public opinion. This is the public opinion in America, and that is determining this continuity in American policy towards China. Now, I come back to the White House guidance because I've explained to you now where that is coming from. But in the guidance, one thing I told you that China has now superseded Russia as the #1 threat for America and its allies as seen by the White House in this guidance. The second thing that's happened is that in diplomacy, language matters. It does look like India has now acquired a higher priority among non-treaty allies than New Zealand, because New Zealand is almost a treaty ally, but not a treaty ally, it's a member of the Five Eyes Alliance. But if you see the language, it looks like India is now being taken as a more urgently needed or important ally than even New Zealand. So this policy, it says that US will work by bolstering and strengthening unparalleled network of partners and will also make smart defense investments. It also says that it will make collective security, prosperity, and democracy a way of life with its allies. Then there's a line which I think is important. It says it will deepen ties with India and work alongside New Zealand, Singapore, Vietnam. So deepen ties with India, you haven't heard this, you haven't seen this before in kind of presidential national security guidance documents in the past. Then it goes on to say that US will now be restoring its credibility globally, which means restore its faith in global partnerships. So US is already getting back in the climate change deal. It's also getting back in the WHO. So you will see some of that happening. And they say that we'll not always be fighting with China. Very interesting line. It says we will be competitive where we need to be, collaborative where we need to be, and adversarial when it needs to be. So again, a very delicately worded but a very important document. So I think I leave you at that. We talked about two things today. First one, I told you, you make your own opinions. Second one is just facts that we've laid out for you.